How to be a romantic rebel artist. All the way through this, I'm going to contrast traditional values, classical values, with romantic values. And the first thing you need to know if you're going to be a good romantic is that the group is bad. Society, civilization is bad. Meanwhile, the individual, especially the romantic individual, is good. Bad group. If you want to be a good romantic, you should like this guy. Anarchy in the UK. Romantics attack the group. They make fun of the group. They run away from the group. They undermine the group. What about heroes? Well, traditional heroes, classical heroes would be like this guy. This is Michael Phelps. Look at all those gold medals he won. And he did it for what? For his country, for the USA. And he's on the cover of Sports Illustrated. In my country, sports is practically a national religion. The whole country is proud of this guy. Here's to be some more traditional heroes. These are firemen. This is at the time of 9/11. And what did the firemen do? They protected the group. They tried to help the group. People they didn't even know, total strangers. They rushed into these burning buildings and tried to save them. Some of these firemen died trying to help the group. Group heroes would include leaders, generals, popes. Look at this guy, Lincoln. We're so proud of him as a society that we built an entire temple. We put him on our penny. He's our great hero, Lincoln. But what about romantic heroes? Well, romantic heroes are rebels. They are controversial. Romantics tend to love outlaws and criminals. This is Bonnie and Clyde, the great bank robbers. Romantics are kind of impressed with insane people and lunatics. Maybe society is insane. Maybe it's Big Nurse who's really insane. Maybe the lunatics are actually the wisest people in the movie. Romantics love children, really almost any child. I mean, a child is full of joy, and children are playful. Children don't know all the rules. Children break the rules, but especially bad kids. Bad kids are natural romantics. About places? Well, classical places, traditional places are where civilization is concentrated. And where's that? Well, the city. Tons of people living all together, very organized. The museums, oh man, museums, we collect traditional things inside of museums. If our society loves it and is proud of it, we stick it in a museum. And if you want to be an educated person, a civilized person, you go to the museums and you look at these things and you admire these things. Look at this garden. This is a very traditional garden. Look at the money involved. Look at the expertise and training involved. Look at all those straight lines. Even the countryside. I live here in the Midwest, and you might think of the Midwest as kind of a wild and romantic place, but it really isn't. And you fly over it, and it looks like a quilt. Look at all those straight lines, all those rectangles, all that agriculture. Every bit of nature there is tamed and organized. I always say the only thing that is free and wild in the Midwest of the United States is the sky. Romantics don't love those places. They don't love the cities. They don't love the museums. They don't love the organized farmland. They love the wilderness. Let nature be your teacher. That's a line by the romantic poet Wordsworth. Climb up the mountains. Get to the very top of the mountain where the glaciers are. You are so far away from your soul can breathe free. The desert, oh man, what could be more romantic than the desert? The desert at night with the stars twinkling overhead. The ocean, it's so wild. You can't even see civilization. You can't even see land from the middle of the ocean. It's highly romantic. What about a storm at sea? If you'd kind of like to be in a ship out there in those high waves, the darkness, the crashing lightning, oh man, that is romanticism in its very essence. Oh, this picture, if you get kind of a thrill out of this picture, the Statue of Liberty being knocked flat by a huge tsunami wave, you're a bit of a romantic. What about form? Well, traditional art, the classical art is all about form, and the form is old, and it's gymnastics. You have judges, and the judges are appointed by organizations, and they know all about the form of every single gymnastic maneuver. Oh, the feet have to be straight up, the toes have to be pointing this way or that way, the body has to be twisted or half twisted. It's all about form. It's not really about the individuality of the girl at all. It's all about form. How well can she do the classical form of gymnastics? Diving, Olympic diving, exactly the same way. They should jump up, they should twirl around, they should flip 3 times, they should appear to levitate for a quarter of a second. They should enter the water and only 1 drop should come up. Oh, 3 drops came up, take off a point. The sonnet is very traditional form. It has to be 14 lines long. You can't have a 13-line sonnet. You can't have a 15-line sonnet. You have to have 14 lines. Every single line should rhyme. You got to use that iambic pentameter. It's all about the form, and that's common in traditional or classical approaches to art. But what about romantics? Romantics believe they should break the form. Create new form. Why don't you just invent your own form? Free verse. Very romantic. Tradition, of course, classical values, it's all about tradition. Why are we doing that? Because we've always done it. The group defines itself through tradition. This is, of course, from Fiddler on the Roof, tradition. It's very important. Marriage, love, it should be all about a traditional wedding. The bride's wearing white. Why is she wearing white? Well, it symbolizes virginity. Well, is the bride really a virgin? I don't think I've even ever been to a wedding where I thought the bride was actually a virgin. So why is she wearing white? Well, because it's traditional. And the groom, of course, he has to wear a tuxedo. Why? Because it's traditional. It's typical of classical values. And where do they get married? Well, in a church, of course. Religion has to be behind this form of love. And who's in the audience? Look at that. It's their group. It's their family and friends are all watching this traditional marriage. It's a group ceremony. And how long should traditional love, the kind of love that society appreciates, how long should it last? Should it last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years? It should last until death. What if they get sick of each other? It does not matter. The group way to demonstrate love is through marriage, and until death do them part. But what about romantics? Well, romantic love is quite a bit different than classical love. This is Shelley, the great romantic poet. Notice how young he is. Notice his wild hair. Notice he's not wearing a tie. This is Harriet. Oh boy, Shelley was an aristocrat, and he meets Harriet here. I don't know, she's like 14 years old, 15 years old. And should an aristocrat marry a commoner? Of course not. Should he marry someone so young? Of course not. But does he marry her anyway? Yes. Why? Well, because he's a romantic. But what happens after a few years? Well, his feelings start to change a little bit. He gets a little bit bored with Harriet, and he meets Mary. Oh my God, his feelings are really in motion now. He loves Mary, not Harriet. Well, from a traditional point of view, should that matter? No, we should stay married. But it doesn't. His feelings, he's romantic. Feelings matter. Harriet. Maybe Harriet could live with them as a kind of like their servant or their friend. Harriet doesn't really go for that. Feelings. From a romantic point of view, feelings are important. You feel like it, do it. Who cares what tradition says? Romantic love is hot. It's intense. It's sexy. It's all about those feelings. And then it's over. It's really, to tell you the truth, it's hard to maintain those feelings maybe for a couple of years, but 10 years, 20 years, not very romantic. What about life? Well, from a traditional point of view, you should live the long, good life. Why long? Well, it takes a long time to learn about civilization. You got to go to all those museums. You need to read all those books. You need to work on your manners and your clothing. And do all those socially approved things. It just takes a long time. The old should be honored in a traditional society. And good, your life should not only be long, it should be a good life. And who gets to define goodness? Well, society, of course, the civilization, not the individual. Well, what about the romantic life? Well, this is Jimi Hendrix. The romantic life doesn't last that long. He lives to be 27. This is Janis Joplin. She's dead by the time she's 27 years old. This is the great poet Keats. He doesn't even get to be 27. He's dead by the time he's 26. This is Basquiat, the modern artist. Basquiat, he's dead by the time he's 27. I think he died of AIDS. This is a famous romantic slogan: live fast, die young, and leave a pretty corpse. This is the grave of Jim Morrison. I think he was dead by the time he was 28. Happiness, I think, tends to be a traditional. It tends to be a group phenomenon. For some reason, when we get into a crowd, we get happier. Football games, gigantic church services, rock concerts. Happiness loves a crowd. Meanwhile, the romantic is someplace all by herself, feeling sad. What is probably the greatest romantic kind of death? Suicide. How to be a romantic rebel artist? Well, to summarize, defy tradition. If you feel like it, do it. Rebel. Love nature. Be as original as a child or a lunatic. Be passionate. Die young.